Welcome to I Drink Your podcast, where we drink and talk about movies from 2007.
Can't stop what's coming.
So, cool beans.
Cool beans.
Mixing his character and his real name. Okay.
We have fun.
How about a suicide pact?
What are you trying to be, an Irish R&B singer?
Oh, it's because he's 60 years old. 60 years old. The alcohol's working.
We need water.
I drink your podcast. I drink it up.
Welcome back to another episode of I Drink Your Podcast. I am Matt, your host with the most. Oh, God, I hate myself.
Starting out hot tonight.
Yeah, we are, Wesley. But yeah, before we get started, I just want to remind everybody, if you guys want to go ahead and rate the podcast, hit subscribe and leave a review. That helps us grow, and we appreciate your support. We're on social media. The links are in all of this stuff. It's super easy to find. So reach out to us and say hello. But without further ado, I want to introduce everybody and ask what you're drinking. So Ben, what are you drinking?
I have a Rising Star cocktail, which is vodka, grapefruit juice, and Lillet Blanc, which is an aperitif.
I looked it up when you sent me what you were going to be drinking. Do you actually have that?
I mean, I had to go to the store.
Oh, okay. What a luxury you must live.
Right?
It is not so hard when your brother works in the industry.
That's true.
That's fair.
Emily, what are you drinking today?
I'm drinking a Lion & Kugel's Sunny Summer Shandy because I was out of options to create something super exciting and I didn't want to leave my house today.
Corbin not around today?
No, he is. But
He's taking a week off.
yeah, basically.
Gotcha.
Let the man rest.
Cool. Wesley, what are you drinking today?
I, in honor of my fellow Whovians, am drinking a sonic screwdriver in reference to space because Doctor Who is in space and he has a sonic screwdriver, and this is a screwdriver that's blue because it has blue curacao.
Is Doctor Who in space?
A lot of the time.
Space and time travel.
Okay.
Come
I thought
on,
he just
Ben.
traveled through time. I didn't know he traveled through space.
What do you think happens when he goes to other places?
I thought all the places were Earth.
No, he goes to other planets.
Educate yourself.
Oh.
I thought you were a nerd, Ben.
No, not that kind.
Our theme is space, can you tell?
Yeah.
Matt, what are you drinking?
So guys, this week I'm drinking water and Tylenol.
Space water.
Space water and
sun
space Tylenol. Yeah, time Tylenol. But this week we are going to be watching Sunshine, the sci-fi horror thriller, I would say, from 2007. The first half of our podcast will be discussing and reviewing Sunshine, and then the second half will feature the Battle of Twits, a competition between Ben, our champion for the moment, and a new challenger, Emily, because we've decided that we're tired of hearing me lose.
So we'll give me a chance to lose.
Right. Which I'm fine with, to be honest.
I mean,
If
no
you guys-
pressure, but we've only ever had one other opponent other than Matt, and they won. So no big deal, Emily.
Go re-listen to that episode. I don't think they should have won.
Yeah.
Wesley has some bias, maybe.
Yeah, obviously towards Ben, and he didn't win.
Okay, so let's just kick this episode off. We are watching Sunshine, which was directed by Danny Boyle, featuring Cillian Murphy, aka Tommy Shelby from Peaky Blinders. We have Chris Evans, aka Captain America. We have Michelle Yeoh, Rose Byrne, Benedict Wong, and Mark Strong.
Cillian Murphy?
I believe it's Killian.
Cillian Murphy.
Because he's super silly in this movie.
Apparently.
I'm just reading it the way it was spelled. Oh,
That's how it's
blue eyes.
spelled. With a C.
Not an S.
To be honest, I spelt it with a K, and my fiance was just like, "You're such trash. I would leave you for him in a heartbeat."
She didn't say that because of the spelling, though, right?
No. Well, partly how badly I spelt it and how hot he is. So Cillian Murphy.
Perfect.
So guys, let's just get into it. If you could be doing any kind of scientist or work in the science field, what would you guys want to do? Emily?
So when I was a kid, I told you all I was really obsessed with space. And so this movie was fantastic for me to relive my glory days of wanting to be an astronomer or going into space. I was obsessed. I would check out books in the library that were all about space. Wouldn't really read them, but would just stare at them for hours when I was 5 or 6 years old.
Did you at least open them up, or you just like stayed at the cover?
Obviously.
Just checking.
No, I do remember my dad got me a fake constellation planetarium thing that we would put in the bedroom, and we would look at the stars. And a lot of times my dad and I would take walks with our dogs at night, and he would tell me all sorts of facts about different nebulas and science things. So I was all about the space stuff.
So Emily's into space. I'm into time. So I wish I were a scientist that studied like time and time dilation and time travel, because I find that concept just so interesting.
Ben, I have got a show that you are going to love.
No, that's silly. Your show's silly. I want to get to the hard science around it. I'm not really interested in the math of it, though, but more just like the paradoxical ramifications of it, which maybe makes it not science at all and instead philosophy. But that's definitely what I'd be interested in. And I know that's weird coming from someone who actually does something science related for a job. Being a science teacher, I have no interest in being a science teacher in my job or career, but I would love to do this. Hey, you're preaching to the choir, my friend.
I wouldn't be as nerdy as y'all. I would be a computer scientist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I would study and develop graphics cards so I could get more frames from my games. Frames win games, baby. So I'd be a computer scientist.
Are we back to the babies? Are the babies back this week, Matt?
Babies back.
I think since Emily stepped in as the new competitor, she should be dropping the babies.
That's true.
I will try, I guess.
I honestly want to apologize to everybody. Sorry. Wes, what kind of science work would you be doing?
Oh, me? Guys, I would love to be a dog scientist. And I don't mean somebody who studies dogs. I want to be a scientist who is a dog. Because I think,
yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, it would just being a dog seems like it would just be the happiest way to live. And then, of course, as a dog scientist, I would also be a dog scientist. But you already got that. And then I would study the science of how to be the best, goodest boy.
That's pretty adorable.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's me in a nutshell.
You're so damn cute.
Doctor Who and dog scientist.
That's right.
Jesus Christ. Have you guys seen this movie before?
No, I haven't.
Wes and Emily haven't seen it before, so we're getting first impressions from you guys. But Ben, where were you when you first saw this movie?
Yeah, I must have seen this movie in around 2008 or 9 when I was working at Movie Gallery. I remember stocking it on the shelf and being really interested in it because I love sci-fi movies. My initial impression of it was that it kind of lost itself in the third act. So I was interested in revisiting this movie because of that. In fact, when I set out to decide what movies we were going to do for this podcast, this was one of the 10 that I was most excited about because I'd only seen it once and it's not one that a lot of people have seen. So I was excited to share this with my friends.
I was shocked that I hadn't seen this. I've been a fan of a lot of these actors for a very long time. Like, it kind of put me on my heels for a minute when I was looking around the crew, and like almost every single one of them has been in some show or movie that I've really liked in the past 13 years. Mostly sci-fi. I'm just spoiler alert. I enjoyed this movie, guys. It was it had its moments of what, but most of the time I was just kind of smiling and enjoying myself.
I agree. I'm surprised I'd never seen it before, being that I'm such a nerd. So when Ben was like, hey, we're watching Sunshine, it's a sci-fi movie, you'll really like it, I went, oh, okay.
Yeah, I had definitely seen it before, and you guys might be surprised by my final review because I came in hot not liking it, and let's just say I don't hate it that much. So let's jump into the plot summary, shall we? In total Freaky Friday fashion, I will be reading the plot summary and starting with Act 1. So in 2057, the sun is dying and Earth is frozen over. Icarus 2 is on its way to deploy a bomb to restart the sun. As they pass Mercury, the crew picks up a distress signal from the crew of the original mission on Icarus 1, which was attempted and failed 7 years prior. Kappa, Cillian Murphy, the crew's physicist, aka payload specialist, makes the decision that a detour to Icarus 1 would increase their chances of success by taking the second payload. Human error sends the mission into chaos, in which their oxygen garden explodes, leaving no food or self-sustaining life support for the return home, and their dear captain dies protecting their ship from the sun.
Yeah, this movie opened so well. When you start the movie and it transitions from, first off, the Foxlight, Searchlight, whatever the opening credit thing, I don't remember what it's called, whatever. It's shot backwards to end on the sun. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, it's the only time they've ever done that.
And then they zoom into the sun and it completely fucked with my brain and it transitioned into Icarus 2, which was just so mind-blowing to me. That's when I knew I'm going to love this movie. I'm going to love this movie.
The sun fucked with your head? Foreshadowing.
Yeah. The sun is treated like a drug in this movie.
Yeah, and I actually thought that was really cool that Cyril, the doctor and psychologist, was the one that was so in touch with the sun. Like you said, Wesley, like it was a drug. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Alex Garland and Danny Boyle, the writer and director. Both of them have worked together before, and I just thought it was really interesting how they worked on this script for like a full year. You know, Alex Garland is really well known for his sci-fi writings, including Ex Machina, Dread, Annihilation. But they worked together on, is it 28 Days Later, I believe? And, you know, Danny Boyle is not so well known for his sci-fi stuff. This was kind of his big sci-fi moment. It was interesting to read how Danny Boyle decided to have the cast live together in order to create that bonding experience of 16 months together on the ship, which I thought was kind of an extreme sense of method acting. You know, you're forcing your actors to live together, but they would go and do activities together like scuba diving to get them to bond and have that kind of real easygoing relationships that they had in the movie. It didn't feel forced to me right away. Like it already felt like this is a well-running machine.
Yeah, I think it definitely benefited the cast that Danny Boyle decided to do that because we are introduced to this crew already 16 months into this journey to the sun. There is no awkwardness of how these characters relate to each other. It's all very much like almost like familial in the way that they interact with each other. Like they know each other so well, and there may be rivalries and they don't all get along, but it's still from a place of love and respect, and especially in the scientific community, respect for each other is so important that it can't overshadow the mission at hand.
Right.
Yeah, they really played well off each other. And I think there was like, it might be later in the movie, but they cut to the picture of them holding up a speeding through space picture. And it's when everything's going terribly. But I felt like you could really sense that the cast really got to know each other. And I didn't know that they had method acted like this for this film. So I guess it makes sense, though, in this style of movie. I think the last one that I've seen that did something like this was that Tank movie with Brad Pitt and Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah, Fury.
Furry,
yeah.
Can we not talk about Shia LaBeouf for a little bit? I'm done with him.
This is definitely a hard science fiction movie, and it's what Alex Garland's known for. It's a science fiction movie that really, the science plays a character almost within the movie. And these are the type of science fiction movies I really like. Examples of ones that aren't like this would be like Mars Attacks or E.T., where it's not really about the science that's going on. It's just about interacting with kind of science fiction-y elements like aliens. But Alex Garland does such a phenomenal job with these scripts of tying the science in and not feeling like it's this overwhelming thing. Like, I can watch this movie and not feel like I'm being lectured at from a science person. It's just something that's very accessible, and it's really a testament to his skill as a screenwriter that he's capable of doing that.
Right.
I like the technical term science person. I don't know much about science. I'm not a very smart man, but I do know what love is.
Thank you. Thank you.
But I'm assuming the gold is scientifically accurate, that would help deflect the sun or heat more. Is that true, Mr. Science Man Ben?
You mean the way that they use the panels to deflect?
Yeah, and I guess my biggest note was the gold spacesuits, which were just the coolest looking thing ever.
Did they specifically say those were gold? That could be like some type of outer
anything.
plating.
It looked gold.
Gold colored, yeah.
So the thing about hard science fiction is that it doesn't have to necessarily be true science to be hard science fiction. A movie like The Core, which gets the science entirely wrong, is still technically hard science fiction because they try to use scientific concepts to explain things.
Like The Matrix is hard science.
Correct. Day After Tomorrow is hard science. 2012 is hard science. Just because the science in it is ridiculous and stupid, that doesn't change that fact. So I don't know if it's actually plausible that they can get that close to the sun and not burn up. I highly doubt it.
Well, we'll find out in 2057.
Oh my gosh.
Brian Cox is the physicist that does a lot of work advising different shows and movies on the science that they put in their films. And this one in particular still has some inaccuracies. I don't remember all of the inaccuracies that people would talk about. Probably the fact that we really can't get that close to the sun right now. But I think it's really cool how they made this hard science still easy to understand for me. Yes, I am a huge nerd and I love science, but I still felt like it was easy to comprehend and still feel motivated.
Well, let's balance that out. Matt, how easy was this for you to understand?
Well, I would go ahead and disagree with Ben on a few parts. Like, I feel like at some points it got a little lectury when Cillian was like explaining, like in his video message, he's like, this will take 8 minutes to get back to you because that's how fast light travels and we're this many miles from the sun. So there were points during that where I could disagree, but I would say on the whole, overall, it made it really accessible with like, okay, there's a big shield that shields you from the sun and you can view the sun at 2%. And like, that's how powerful it is. And there's a oxygen garden where we're using plants to create oxygen and we're creating our own gravity. There's a holodeck, more or less. So like, I felt like, yeah, it did a pretty good job of like making that world real and then selling it more or less.
Yeah, I'm going to push back on you a little bit and say that I'm not saying that there was no exposition given. Like that's something very expository because it explains the ending scene and shot. Like that's needed. What I meant by not being lectury is anyone who's ever read the book The Martian, the first 100 pages get very bogged down in math and science terms, and it feels very lectury at points instead of something that's accessible for all people. Whereas this one, they don't really go too deep into the science concepts. They just mainly stay surface level on things that we can understand and things that we have connections to already.
Because we understand what 8 minutes feels like, Matt.
Yeah. And let me just go ahead and say,
technical terms.
Matt Damon really fucking I'd learned everything from that guy. That movie was not boring at all.
You guys are such a Kappa and Mace right now.
I like that the science concepts that may not hold up to scrutiny, though, didn't get in the way from the movie still being good. Like we've all seen movies where the science is so ridiculous and over the top that it takes you completely out of the movie. And even things like within the sound design of this movie, how when they would be outside the ship, you would hear the ship move almost like it's flowing through a medium, which it wouldn't make any noise in space. That's something that would usually really bother me, but it didn't bother me in this movie because of just how well they presented it.
Yeah, and that didn't bother me either. And I think it was especially because of the sound design inside the ship, the internal sounds that you could feel, especially as the shields were shifting. And I think Michelle Yeoh's character, Cora, she goes through and she's like talking about how the ship feels like it's breaking. And I could feel that in my own body just from this movie, which was really cool.
I would just want to talk about the end of Act 1 real quick. I loved how, the captain, he kind of got hooked on the drug a little bit, would you say, when he went and looked at the sun, and then the psychology officer, Cyril, was like, what does it look like? What does it look like? It's going to be bright as hell. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't actually believe that the captain got hooked on it at all. And that kind of plays into the themes with this movie, which this movie very much leans into the theme of science versus faith. And all of the characters take a different stance on where they believe. And I think that's probably the strongest thing going for this movie, is that each character felt unique in their perspective on how they looked at things in science and faith.
It kind of felt like each one represented a bit of a religion. And I don't really know why I feel that way, but, each character kind of had their own ideals, and they were not super drastic, but kind of relatable in their views about religion. And specifically talking about like the sun was their god in this case.
Yeah. So Matt, you said that the captain got kind of like sucked into the idea of the sun. I didn't feel that. I thought he was more inspired by it than really like the idea of worshiping it. I think Cyril, the psychologist, as you talked about, he was much more just like in awe of it. And then you had Cora, who wasn't really concerned about the sun, but definitely worshiped life in a different way through her loving that oxygen garden and the plants that grew in there. So all three of those kind of represent the faith aspect. And then you had the other three of the other characters like Mace and Trey and Harvey, who were very much atheistic in their belief. Like Mace was very
into computers.
Yeah, he was into computers. He was kind of held grudges. Like he was the one who was always fighting back against Kappa, and he would just throw anyone under the bus if it at any point compromised the mission.
In the first act more, yeah.
Well, even after Trey died, he was ready to kill Kappa because it was Kappa's fault that Trey killed himself. Sorry, we're jumping way ahead into Act 2. But yeah, we'll get back to that. Trey, he very much was just all about his calculations and being very science-minded. And Harvey was just self-serving and worried about like his own physical body and him surviving this. And then you had the two other characters left, Cassie and Kappa, who were more the moderates, who kind of found a balance between science and faith inside of them.
Wesley, did you like the colors?
Nice transition.
Don't even get me started. Yes, I did. I don't really have. Yeah, they were good colors. They were good colors.
Like conversations about science and God from Ben, just hitting Wes with the most. Hell yeah!
Follow up with the toughest question of the episode.
Oh shit, dude! There were some good colors though in Wes's defense. All right, let's just move right on into Act 2, guys. Trey, the mathematician, is heavily sedated as he is suicidal for his grave mistake. The Icarus 2 crew continues with the mission and docks with Icarus 1. Ew, docking. Finding the empty ship of human life, but filled with 7 years of growth in the oxygen garden. In the solar observation room, they find the charred remains of the original crew, assuming they had been entranced by the wonders of the sun. All of a sudden, Icarus 2 separates from Icarus 1, forcing the boarding party to leave. Mace, Harvey, and Kappa prepare to leave, while Cyril stays behind, ensuring their successful launch into space with nothing but one spacesuit and makeshift insulation. With oxygen left for only 4 people to complete the mission, they decide to kill Trey, only to find him already dead in the Earth room from an apparent suicide.
Is that where he was? He was in the Earth room?
Yeah. The birds were flying around him.
Oh.
Now,
Jack.
Before we get into more deep science questions, Matt kind of touched on one of my biggest science questions. So you said it was skin flakes? That's what all the dust was?
Yeah.
I wrote down, why is there so much dust on the Icarus One? Is there that much dust in space? What is dust?
So dust is
boy.
primarily skin cells. And that was one gripe that I had with this also, was that there's only, for probably the last 6 years, only one person that's been alive. And that's the captain of the Icarus One. And he's all scarred from the sun. I didn't believe for 1 second that much dust could accumulate from one person who doesn't even have the typical skin cells that we think of. Like, he's got the burnt skin cells. So that really bothered me.
Is dust really just skin?
Dust is like 85 to 90% skin. Yeah.
What's the other?
Sand. So I actually, even though I didn't think it was very believable, I thought it definitely added to the feel of the movie in this part. You know, the emotion of what the mystery, keeping the mystery alive of there's no one here. The lighting that they were using these flashlights and they kept moving them around, and it just elevated the mystery for me, even though I didn't believe it for a second that was just all skin. You know, they should have thrown some spider webs in there. I'm
so happy that this is everyone's hang up, and like two people thought they were going to survive in space without spacesuits.
Oh, I mean, we'll get there too. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. Just wrapping themselves in tinfoil and being like, well, hope for the best.
Hold your breath.
What did you guys think about the use of the frame insertions and the subliminal messages as they entered into Icarus One?
Boo!
Why didn't you like it, Matt?
Anything that's like supposed to be subliminal like that, where you're like, did I see that? I'm not the type of person to just accept that and continue watching. I'm the person that's going to pause it and go back and frame by frame, go and then find it and be like, okay. So it just doesn't hit me the same, but maybe that just depends on the way you're viewing this film. Maybe it needs to be viewed in a theater or something, or at a place where everybody's watching and you won't get in trouble for pausing. So that's just me though.
Well, why do you think they chose to use the subliminal messages? Like, what were they trying to convey through that?
Again, I think this entire scene, they were trying to up the mystery of what the hell is going on. And it culminates in Icarus 2 suddenly separating from Icarus 1. And so in my mind, you know, this drastic blue and grays and blacks suddenly flashing with these yellows, it threw it in your face that, you know, there were people here, just like this other Icarus 2. You know, they have the same parallel kind of photo. And it just kept on making me think, okay, what's going to happen? They talked, I think, before going to Icarus 2 or Icarus 1, before they went to Icarus 1, Marv is talking to Cora and Cassie and someone else, I think, about that they only have enough oxygen for 4 people. I think that was the conversation that they had before. And then when they went over there, I was like, oh, Captain America's going to kill everyone because, you know, then there's only 4 people left. And so there were just a lot of little pieces, and that added to the mystery of what the hell happened to this crew and what's going to happen to the next crew.
Right. You also have the captain rewatching those old logs of the captain of Icarus 1. So the captain of Icarus 2 was watching the old logs from Icarus 1, and he's describing this catastrophic event to his vessel as beautiful. And he just kept on replaying it. So I thought they did a really good job of leading into where the movie's going.
I agree. And Emily, the subliminal messages they use, it wasn't only used to show the Icarus 1 crew. It was used also in the third act to kind of show Mark Strong, the captain of Icarus 1, with like the burnt up face and the observation deck.
Right.
So I do think that a lot of it has to do with trying to create that parallelism between what's happening between the crew on Icarus 2 to what happened with the crew on Icarus 1, because you did have Searle, who very much was going down the path to become what happened to the captain on Icarus 1. So I think it was just a nice way to not only pique our interest because, for a lot of the movie thus far, it's been really quiet and kind of meditative.
That's a good way to put it.
Now all of a sudden we're getting into this more mystery and, as Matt said, thriller horror type genre. So I do think it was to kind of signal this movie's taking a turn here.
And so it's not quite as abrupt. Like, a lot of critics did not like the transition. They thought it was too abrupt. They thought it was really out of sorts. But I think you're right. Just having that in the second act helped kind of link into the genre shift.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, like, second time watching this through, I overall liked the movie better, but I still don't like that subliminal frame blips. I would really like to recut this movie with just Coca-Cola advertising or just a different brand product placement.
Best Buy.
Yeah, Best Buy or whatever in there just to really sell something,
So we talked about the three guys. I don't think his name is Marv. It's Mace, isn't it?
Mace. Sorry. I just watched Sin City, so thank you for correcting me.
Yeah.
I often get those two confused.
I just watched Home Alone, so
Mace, Harvey, and Kappa are the three scientists that feel like they have a chance to get back to Icarus 2 because the connection between Icarus 1 and 2 gets kind of blasted. So the two ships aren't connected anymore. And one person has to stay back to press the button to open the hatch to get them to shoot out.
Right.
So Mace, Harvey, and Kappa, Kappa dons the one spacesuit that they have. And then Mace and Harvey just kind of wrap themselves in insulation. What'd you guys think of that?
Why didn't the guy in the spacesuit, why wasn't he the one that stayed behind to open the door? And then he could just fly out on his own. Like, if you're just going to slingshot people willy-nilly, it's not like Kappa had any extra control because he was in the spacesuit. Like, at least if he stayed behind and the other three slingshotted across, he could take his time and, gracefully calculated jump towards the opening.
Mm.
That's a good point. I didn't think of that. There was no reason Cyril needed to stay behind, I guess, other than character reasons, which is he wanted to see the sun.
Right. And I think in this movie, there was this rushed feeling that they needed to get out of there and get to the sun as quickly as possible. And honestly, if you think back to the crew, they have been with each other for 16 months. So being left alone, I think that would be more horrifying, and you'd rather die than having to be alone for that amount of time without these people that you've been with for so long.
I'll buy that.
Speaking of people dying, I had an emotional reaction when Trey died, and I'm not really sure why. I just kind of wanted to talk about this. When they finally get back to Icarus 2, Harvey has died because first off, he's kind of a jackass, but I did feel a little bit bad for him. Did anyone else feel a little bad for him?
Not at all.
Only in
I
the
didn't
sense
like
that,
him.
like, it seemed like a silly way to die.
Yeah, but when he tried to play the "I'm the captain now" card and then didn't volunteer to stay back on the ship to press the button, I was like, "Fuck you, dude. I hope you die."
Yeah.
I'm the captain now.
What did he said, like, oh, you guys are gonna think it's me or something? Like, you guys are gonna make me stay back?
And that honestly definitely made me feel pretty spiteful towards him. I was like, well, you fucking asshole. You just, not okay.
Mhm.
But then when he did die, it just, watching him float away, it left this emptiness inside me. He dies, and then right after that, Cyril dies. And I love the little detail of the blisters on his face that he's been sunburnt and he's been staring at the sun for a ton of time. But then when we get to Trey, that scene when they're all talking about who has to die, specifically they're talking about killing Trey because they only have enough oxygen to complete the mission for 4 people. And then they've already accepted that they're all going to die. But when Mace leaves to go kill him, and he's already dead, and he's in the Earth room, and the birds are flying around, and all you hear, again, that sound design of just the birds and the rushing wind of their wings, and seeing his wrists slit, I cried. The music completely took control of my emotions, and I sobbed, and I haven't sobbed in a movie for years.
Yeah, and I also think you mentioned the conversation they had before that where they decided that they needed to kill Trey. I think the fact that conversation preceded us seeing Trey die made it so much more impactful, because not only is a character that we liked dead, but really our crew has kind of lost their humanity at this point, because they've decided that, one life is not worth saving when you compare it to the future of mankind. Like, they've really given up a piece of themselves to make that decision to kill Trey, and then they get there and the decision's already made. So you're also kind of mourning the loss of the humanity of the rest of the crew because of the decision that they made and have to live with. And not only that, but the decision ended up not mattering.
And the conflict that resulted from that decision, because it was pretty contentious.
Yeah, that decision ended up not mattering, just like Harvey, is that who flew away in space? How his decision to not sacrifice himself ended up not mattering. Like, a lot of these decisions that they make in this movie end up not going their way and still happening in the worst way possible. Kind of like naming your ship Icarus and thinking you might come back from floating too close to the sun.
Right, just setting it up to fail.
Yeah, Wesley, if you could rename the vessel.
Not Icarus 1.
Not Icarus.
On Icarus.
Let's move on to Act 3. While Kappa checks on the payload, Icarus notifies him that the crew will not survive because there are 5 crew members still on board. Kappa finds the 5th crew member in the solar observation room, which is burned, and it is deformed Captain Pinbacker from Icarus 1, feeding on the raw power of the sun. Pinbacker works to stop the crew by attacking them and shutting down the computer. Eventually, Kappa successfully launches the payload and sets it off to restart the sun. Back on Earth, we see Kappa's sister on a frozen wasteland, and we watch the sun get reignited.
So I know, as we've talked about, a lot of the people who reviewed this movie did not like the movie because of this third act. And even I, the first time I watched it, didn't like it. So when I watched it this time, I wanted to watch it through the lens of more analyzing the themes of the movie. So we've already talked about the science versus faith piece. So I want to talk about the role that Pinbacker plays within that argument. And I feel that Pinbacker very much is kind of the fundamentalist in terms of religion. Like, he's the religious fanatic that really shows what happens when kind of people get in the way of scientific progress. Like, it's really vilifying and personifying religion in the form of Pinbacker, and he is the one that is now preventing the mission from being successful in the way that faith can kind of prevent us from making progress as a society. Did anyone else feel that?
Didn't feel that until you said that. I can completely identify with the idea. There are lots of religious fanatics out there and atheists that are really strong in their beliefs. And I'm one of those atheists that are not quite so strong in my beliefs, but I think the personifying of this faith-driven madman against science is completely accurate.
I didn't remember that he was just this crazed man who'd been talking to God for the last 7 years, and he was been ordered to send all humanity to heaven. Like, I didn't remember that. So yeah, that does ring true, where he does personify that and gets in the way of science. And then Kappa, inversely or oppositely, represents science. Progress.
You guys want to know the deep revelation that I had? Revelations? What's a revelation?
Was it that word?
It is now. No, but the thing that I couldn't get over once I realized it was that Captain America, this whole movie, had to call somebody Cap A.
I was gonna say something about that, but I'm glad that you did.
Thank you. I'm glad I wasn't alone.
In terms of other characters in the movie, I kept on being like, by order of the Peaky Blinders, I order the sun to restart. I kept on saying that over and
Was
over.
that Rose Byrne?
yeah, that was Rose Byrne.
Wesley, you said that in some text that you sent me that you didn't really like the spatial and visual look of things at the end of the movie. Can you talk about that?
It's just jarring. I mean, I already spoiled it from the beginning, but I did like this movie. And even though the last 15 minutes, like there were some really, really intense shaking cameras, jarring angles. It just was challenging to, and maybe it's because most of the movie had a lot of either wide shots of space or interior shots that were just kind of stable and showing a living environment. That the end of this movie where they introduce all this hard action, they also do it with very extreme camera work.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it's not that I didn't like it as much, it's that I didn't think it was necessary. And it kind of took the excitement of wrapping up this long story with such action, violence, thrillers. Like, it just seemed way too jarring.
Yeah, and I can see why you would feel that. As I thought about
Thank you.
after hearing you say that, I think a lot of the way that the movie shot at the end is to kind of show the way that time and space get distorted as you get closer to a large gravity mass. Like, it gets very choppy and gets very elongated in some parts. And even the scene where Kappa's set off the nuclear bomb, he's basically suspended in time and space as the sun is on one side of him and the bomb is detonating on the other side. And as I was looking through IMDb, one of the questions that was frequently asked was, who dies and how do they die? And you would think that it would just be a one-line sentence for Kappa, but it was like a 3-paragraph diatribe about how he's really didn't die in the sense of what he experiences, because he just experiences an eternity of being stuck in that spot between the sun and the bomb because of the way time is dilated.
Is that why he was always dreaming about it too?
Well, falling in the sun, yeah.
Yeah.
But that whole interpretation of the ending, I thought that was kind of cool, because I also read that gigantic paragraph of how he just perpetually forever staring at the sun in the awe of it.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you, Wesley. I thought it was jarring. I thought it was really hard on my eyes, kind of bouncing back and forth between the cuts of this blurry, scarred, burned man. Yeah, Mark Strong, way to show up as another villain. Love him. But I was thinking about that. It was nice to show that he wasn't that human anymore, too. I think that was another way. And all of these events unfolded because of human mistakes and human error. Trey was the one that initially got them on this path of forgetting to account for the shields in the proper spot, and that's why they had to stop, and the captain dies, and blah, blah, blah. But then Captain Pinbacker, who's also a human, ends up just going on a rampage. And so it really shows that it's not like space is against you. It's more of this immovable object that you can't fight against. It's the humans inside that are fighting against each other.
We need to send dogs into space to restart
Dog
our sun.
scientists!
Yeah, you need a dog scientist.
Yeah, I mean, that was jarring for sure, but I never really thought about gravity and getting closer to the sun and time dilating. So I guess that does make more sense. It is a clear separation from the peacefulness of the main ship, the lunar landing. So that is nice. But overall, I would agree with Wesley. Very jarring in I'd say like an overall negative action way. But that's just my gut reaction. Upon hearing your analysis, I'm sure I would view it a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What
thank
did we
you.
all think about the different deaths of the 4 remaining crew? Well, Kappa didn't die, I guess, but
Getting stabbed in the back of your stomach right as you find hope would suck. You know, oxygen garden lady getting stabbed as soon as she found a tiny little new piece of hope.
Plant.
You know, you might say piece of plant hope.
I immediately went, Wally!
So she's like, oh my gosh, well, you might live. And then she just immediately gets her life taken from her. That was kind of really sad.
I mean, I think Mace had the most movie ending death. In the first act, when he reaches his hand into the coolant, I specifically wrote, like, why did they show this? It has to be foreshadowing. And it was. And at first I wrote down it was foreshadowing for him burning his hand upon re-entry to Icarus 2, which I thought was a nice way to kind of call back to that scene, to put it back in our memory that coolant scene happened. But then seeing him like freeze to death in that coolant, like, it was like, oh, obviously that's why they showed us that earlier.
Right.
I think that's also interesting that his death was one of the most sacrificial for the rest of his crew. And how you had called out earlier that he was the one to immediately throw people under the bus to make the mission continue. And his death paralleled his choices in the beginning.
Yeah, and at the same time, though, it was very in character because he was always about what is going to be best for the mission. So him sacrificing himself, I mean, there was never a doubt that he was going to do that if he was put in that position.
Right. He even hated Kappa. And in the second act, he says Kappa's the one that needs to be protected from space and puts him in the spacesuit. Like, flat out, it's like he's the only one that can navigate the payload. But I really did love how it was a callback to him freezing his hand, and that's how he ends up dying, or because of blood loss. We don't know. I do like the ambiguous way of these deaths because we don't really know how Cassie dies. She's probably died because of the sun. We don't know.
Or the bomb. Speaking of bombs.
This movie bombed.
What a transition.
Thanks. Yeah, this movie bombed at the box office. It only made $32 million.
With a $40 million budget.
Yeah, why do you guys think that is?
Here's my take. July 2007, we were all standing in line to watch Harry Potter 5.
We were all standing in line to buy the 7th book.
That too.
Like July 7th, 2007. That was the 7th Harry Potter book.
It was a busy month. I think we were at Sunshine.
We definitely were. That's why we didn't see it.
But yeah, no, this came out in July, but also Danny Boyle did not get the funding that he needed. And so he ended up trying to find funds to get to that 40 million that he needed. And so already that just kind of, to me, bodes for a painful box office. But Transformers was in the summer, Harry Potter 5 was in the summer, and then this one originally was supposed to have an April theatrical debut, and then they changed it. Plus, it did pretty well, not in the United States, like comparatively. Most of that 32 million's from not the US. Well,
and with the cast that they had kind of being more international, I think that definitely helped. I do think that this movie was hurt by being moved from April to July, because this is not your typical summer movie. Like, you do not go to a movie in the summer to watch an introspective on science versus faith.
I do.
Well, I do too, but the general audience does not go see a movie like this during the summer.
It was only in 461 movie theaters as well in the United States and Canada. That's not
at its peak?
On the weekend box office, it took in 1.3 million. I'm rounding up.
Yeah, so it had a soft release on July 20th, and then it expanded wide July 27th. So that's why you're seeing that.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, like, that's like a limited run.
Mm-hmm. No, it expanded wide after that.
So wide.
I don't think we talked enough about the music in this.
We really
because there is a piece of music from this called Adagio in D minor.
This song has been in everything, and I was talking to the group beforehand. I feel like it's been overused at this point, but you guys kind of pointed out that this was the original written for this movie.
Mm-hmm.
What else has this been in?
I mean, I most recently heard it when I was watching The Last Dance. It was in either this last episode or second to last episode, but I actually paused The Last Dance to look up what song it was, because I was like, oh my God, this piece of orchestral music is so moving. Like, what is this from? And I saw it was from Sunshine, and I got super excited that we were going to be doing this movie then.
Yeah, well, I have it burned in my brain now, so when I hear it, I'm like, it's like almost like a piece of this like generic music now that when I hear it, it's like it's lost all of its luster. I remember seeing it in Kick-Ass, and then I started hearing it over and over and over and over again in like commercials, in like all sorts of television.
I missed this part of the conversation, so I did not listen to it, I don't know what we're talking about, but I looked up what this song is all in, and this list is pretty ridiculous for a song that isn't like Happy Birthday.
Yeah, I know last week we talked about temp tracks, and I feel like some sci-fi movies almost use this probably as a temp track when they're editing and making their movies, because it is such a moving piece that you could hand this to someone and say, make something like this, and it would fit in so many movies.
Right. Yeah. And, originally Danny Boyle wanted Hans Zimmer to do the music. It ends up being John Murphy who did this piece. And, he worked with Underworld, which I didn't know was a band. It's a British band that did a ton with Danny Boyle for the Olympics in 2012. Like, they did the whole opening ceremony together. But throughout the entire movie, the music fits so well to add to that introspective emotions, and as they transition even into the slasher part of the movie, it really fits so well up to that ending credits song so beautifully.
I was very much distracted by the color. I don't even know if I heard any music.
I didn't see anything other than colors.
So that's Wesley's review. I love the colors.
I would be interested to know who makes the money when they reuse the song. I would be interested to know if it's Fox Searchlight, aka the Fox Music Group, or if it's John Murphy. Because I could see them trying to recoup some money from such a bomb track. And I mean, like, obviously this movie made its money back eventually, but it obviously wasn't a hit. So,
well, it's kind of sad to actually think about that, thinking that, all these phenomenal scores that we know from John Williams, that somehow he's not the one benefiting from those, that somehow it's become like corporate property. So I really hope that John Murphy is the one getting the money for the use of this, because I don't know, it just makes me sad to think that a creator of a piece of art would not be able to maintain ownership of it.
Yeah. Welcome to the art world, baby.
Baby. Yeah, if you guys know any of that licensing and property stuff, go ahead and tweet at us, baby. We want to know.
Wesley, let's hear your review.
A cast full of sci-fi actors who have only become more popular since this film was released, and Rose Byrne. Sunshine is a delightful watch for anyone who just saw the Falcon X and wonders what it would be like if they kept going past the International Space Station and also had a giant bomb attached in true Elon Musk fashion. I just liked the movie. Some scenes were hard to watch when the camera got all wobbly. I give this movie 8 out of 9 planets orbiting the sun, and if Pluto doesn't count, then I guess it's an 8 out of 8.
So right from the opening shot of the sun transitioning into Icarus's shields, I was hooked. This movie is a marvel and uses its score and visuals to transport you beyond Earth. The characters were believable and authentic, while the impending impossible task haunted me throughout the film. Although I thought the end was a bit contrived, it overall fit with the themes of science versus religion and left me satisfied. I loved it. 9 out of 10 aviators.
Nice. My review actually touches on a lot of the similar stuff that Emily just said, so I'll read mine.
Oh, he just copied my review.
Sunshine does a great job of creating characters who are distinct from one another in motivation and belief. The sound design creates a sense of being in space and aboard the Icarus II, and the visuals and colors are truly phenomenal to look at. Despite a third act that veers in a different direction than expected, it holds true to the themes developed in the early acts and creates a sense of dread similar to the existential dread the crew is experiencing. 93% full brightness of the sun.
Isn't that bad?
No, that's good.
Wouldn't that be bad?
No, because the sun is good. Sun is good.
You guys unintentionally left the best review for last, and I love it. Much shorter than Ben's and Emily's and Wes's.
Not with all this preface, goddamn.
I order of the Peaky fucking Blinders. I give this movie 6 out of 10 Tommy guns. Cillian Murphy, aka Tommy Shelby, is great in this sci-fi horror shit. Watch it if you're a nerd. Peaky Blinders if you're not a nerd.
Before we start the battle, I've compiled a dream team of movie characters. I'm going to roll a d4. Going in age order, Emily's a 1, I'm a 2, Matt's a 3, Ben, you're a 4. Whoever gets rolled gets to pick who between Emily and Ben gets to pick their character first. So here we roll. Emily.
I'll just pick first. What am I picking?
Your choices are Zaphod Beeblebrox, Ruby Raz, Professor Sprout, Chewbacca, Frodo Baggins, or Ripley from Alien.
Ooh, all of those are great, but I think I'm going to go with the first one.
Yay! I'm so happy.
So that's Zaphod Beeblebrox from
Hitchhiker's Guide to the
Hitchhiker's
Galaxy.
Guide. Yep.
Now, before Ben guesses, Emily, I want you to try to guess what you think Ben wants.
Okay, let me think of what I want first. Okay.
Honestly, I think he's going for Chewbacca.
Give me Professor Sprout, baby!
Yeah.
I knew he was gonna take
I knew it was going to be Sprout.
Yeah.
All right, onward, and it is time to play Battle of the Twit and Emily.
Yay!
I will read 5 questions, to which I expect 5 out-of-this-world answers. Each round is worth 1 point, and at the end, I will declare Star-Lord. I'll give more brain headspace to creative and fun answers. The loser this week will have to create an Icarus 3, an egg lander that must deliver a payload of raw egg down to the surface of the Earth without breaking. Hopefully, I don't. Honestly, I don't really care. So the first question we're going to score immediately after, and the loser has to take a massive, massive penalty drink. So Icarus is known in Greek mythology for his tragic death by flying too close to the sun with wings made of feathers and wax. But the world of Greek mythology has many other amazing stories. I want you guys to create a sci-fi movie around a Greek mythology and pitch it to Alex Garland as the next big thing. And Ben, we're going to start with you.
Great. So I chose the story of Sisyphus. And now I'm gonna recap the story a little bit, and then I'll jump into my pitch. So Sisyphus, after snitching on Zeus, is pursued by Death. Sisyphus manages to outsmart and chain up Death, meaning that while he's chained, no people can die. After being freed by Ares, god of war, Death took Sisyphus to the underworld. However, having not been buried properly due to a request from Sisyphus to his wife to not put a coin in his mouth, he couldn't pay for passage on the river Styx. Therefore, Sisyphus was sent back to the living by Hades, escaping death again. Once Sisyphus is finally caught by the gods, they decide his punishment should last forever. And it did, with him continually pushing a rock to the top of the mountain. So in my sci-fi movie, my main character's name is Sisyphus. He's a scientist, inventor, billionaire who's seeking to discover a cure for death and to allow people to live forever. He recently rolled out an invention that puts people into an extended state of living through the use and manipulation of a time loop, where people are allowed to live out their days and not age, all while Earth moves along at a normal time. There would be an evil corporation that's looking to discredit the work of Sisyphus due to a desire for population control and resource management. As people volunteer to be put into the time loop, Sisyphus is on the brink of a pill that would allow for the isolation and removal of the gene that causes cells to age. He decides to test the pill on himself and finds that it works. The evil corporation captures Sisyphus and forces him into one of his own time loop machines, where he is forced to relive the day that he found the cure for death, knowing that he can never use it for the betterment of humanity. Clues throughout the movie and the ending imply that Sisyphus entered a time loop before the beginning of the movie, and the movie that we just watched was the day of discovery of the cure for death that Sisyphus is forced to relive.
Okay, I am not going to talk about my myth quite yet, but hundreds of years in the future, humans are desperate to leave the depleted Earth. They catch a communication signal light years away, and scientists determine it is another life form contacting them. A crew sets out to find them, as it is their only clue in order to discover a new habitable planet and save the human species. Months pass, and as they get closer and closer to the signal, the crew of scientists start decoding the messages in order to send communication back. They start to echo the signal to gain more time for them in order to decipher the code. The scientists obsess and fall in love with this signal, to the point where they end up plotting against one another to decode it first. A mutiny erupts with countless and meaningless deaths of the crew as they are all transfixed on the sounds of the signal, creating a sense of madness. Unbeknownst to them, because human technology has evolved so much in the past few hundred years, the scientists have forgotten that they lost one of the 60 SpaceX's Starlight satellites from the year 2020. And it has just been echoing back what it was programmed to do. watching and waiting to be rescued. The final surviving crew member reaches out to Starlight in a window through the airlock, desperate for the object of his desire. As he is driven to the brink of insanity, he thinks he can still be with the one he loves and save the Earth. He shoots himself out into the space, unprotected and alone, dying just as Narcissus kills himself, consumed with his own beauty. So if you didn't pick up on it, I used the story of the nymph Echo and the hunter Narcissus, both cursed souls in Greek mythology.
That is a hard one to judge for some reason. Matt, do you have any feelings?
I have no feelings. You should know this.
Oh boy, both good answers. Emily, I liked your storytelling a little more. I feel like I saw it, but I think you might have lost a little bit in the fact that you kind of used what the Greek mythology was as more of a twist, as opposed to describing where you were coming from.
Well, Echo is a nymph that she only repeats everything that anyone says to her. So that's the whole premise of it.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. I assumed from Echo.
Okay.
I liked Emily's story better, so we're going with Emily.
Suck it!
So on to question 2. Everybody aboard Icarus 2 has a specific role. As a math and science teacher, I would love to hear what you think your opponent's job as the 9th member on this crew would be and how they would meet their ultimate end on this mission. And we're going to start with Emily.
Okay, I might go a little long because Ben is very talented. So Ben is skilled at many things. When it comes to organization, he excels in spreadsheets to the point where it becomes almost obsessive. When it comes to building and mechanical knowledge, he succeeds because of his handyman experience, including helping his mom finish a patio. When it comes to his work as a technical director in high school theater, he convinces students to design sets using old materials and can get things done in a timely manner. All of these skills come down to his exceptional, creative, problem-solving abilities. He can just about do anything. Now, Icarus 2 already has a really solid crew containing an engineer, botanist, physicist, doctor, blah, blah, blah. However, they do not have someone capable of the creative problem-solving necessities required of the daily operations of the ship and the organization of it all. Therefore, Ben would need to be the operations technician on the ship, which includes general maintenance. He's a janitor. He would be in charge of making everything run smoothly, including fixing random equipment, settling disputes between shipmates, and solving random problems such as the ship's plumbing. Yes, astronauts poop. Prior to the movie, Ben has completed many problem-solving tasks as the operations technician over the last 16 months. When the movie opens, we see the zoom into the sun transitioning into the shield of the ship, and we hear a distant scream in the background. Unfortunately for Ben, while fixing and testing Cyril's sunglasses on the observational sun deck, the shields were too low, and he is burnt crispy on the spot. Later, we see Cyril with his fixed sunglasses, admiring the sun again, briefly wondering what happened to Ben.
It's an afterthought.
That's what he was thinking about while he was looking at the sun.
So, recap: operations technician, aka janitor, burnt by sun deck.
Yeah, fixing sunglasses.
Okay. Ben?
Emily's multi-talented and could serve many functions aboard a starship. In fact, she'd be brought along on the mission due to her multiple areas of expertise, just in case one of the crew members dies aboard the ship. She could use her math skills aboard the ship for navigation and telemetry, her leadership skills to captain the crew and make difficult decisions, or her gardening knowledge to maintain the oxygen garden. However, her primary function aboard the ship would be that of chef, since Emily's a very talented cook and would find creative ways to keep the crew fed and nutritionally balanced while aboard the Icarus 2. Feeding a crew of 9 people aboard a spaceship that has limited resources would be a full-time job and one that Emily would excel at. Emily's death aboard the ship, however, would be very tragic and most definitely would have occurred prior to the events of this movie due to her being a tad awkward and clumsy. So Emily, while on her morning jog around the spaceship, trips and falls into the ejection button, shooting her out into space. She does her most valiant effort to breaststroke through space back to the ship, only to realize that it's all for naught. She dies with the knowledge that her time aboard the Icarus 2, all 4 days of it, were the best of her life as her body crashes into the moon.
All right. So to recap, Ben, chef, tripped into an ejection pod and then tried to swim back to the ship?
Yeah.
Okay.
After 4 days in space.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's why they don't remember me anymore. It's been almost a year and a half.
Yeah, they've mourned. They're past that.
They must be very hungry, though. I do like that you guys both started out with very complimentary how talented and multi-skilled you both are. So congrats for stroking each other's egos.
Thank you.
I don't need any help.
All right, question 3. Time to get those wonderful characters that I picked out for you guys. So
Excited.
on the Icarus II, the crew used a simulated room to help cope with being far from home and would have projections of things that made them happy to maintain their sanity. With the characters you drew before we began, I want you to describe what their Earth room or happy place looks like for them. So, Ben, let me hear about what the happy place is for Professor Sprout.
So Professor Sprout is professor of herbology at Hogwarts and head of Hufflepuff House. Any scientist who specializes in herbology loves the sticky icky. So her happy place would be a cloud of smoke, some Bertie Bott's every flavored beanbag chairs, a few pumpkin pasties and a bottle of giggle water, and her best buds, McGonagall and Hooch. As head of Hufflepuff, she already has connections to the finest dealers in the wizarding world, so you know she only smokes that good shit. And the Earth Room would reek of it. Playing in the background would be her favorite wizard band, Devil's Snare, which is an actual wizard rock band, let me tell you. She would just chill in the haze and breathe in that sweet kush, letting it calm her and return her to a simpler time before Chambers of Secrets and that kiss-ass Neville Longbottom.
I love it. And Emily, now no pressure, but Zaphod Beeblebrox is one of my favorite characters of all time, so...
Zaphod Beeblebrox is a wild, immature spaceman with 2 heads and 3 arms he added himself, the second head being of non-presidential traits he wants to hide from the world. In his Earth room, he would want to be the least presidential as possible. Zaphod would be surrounded by a bunch of shiny, colorful buttons that people would tell him not to press. He would tell Cyril to press them anyway to find out what would happen. Screen wipe! And then he would be transported to different scenes according to each shiny button. Click! In a strip club, in some chick's boobs. Click! Moshing in an alien rock concert. Click! The restaurant at the end of the universe. Click! Bored pooping! Being able to use the improbability button from the Heart of Gold, but with no severe consequences, would be the happiest place for Zaphod Beeblebrox.
You did real good.
I hope I didn't disappoint.
No, and now I just have to weigh how much I love Hitchhiker's Guide versus both answers. Moving on, question 4. So I've had a big boy crush on Cillian Murphy since I first saw him in 28 Days Later. Something about those baby blue eyes just never let you forget them, but that's just my opinion, man. So the question is, who has the most striking eyes in a movie? This will be a debate question, so you will have to defend your answer against your opponent's counterattacks. And we're going to start with Emily.
Here we go. Kevin in Sin City has the most striking eyes in a movie because of their unusual way of getting under your skin. Played by Elijah Wood, who already has the most beautiful and memorable blue eyes, Kevin's glasses hide this important feature to amp up the mystery. So when we do finally see his murdering eyes, they are even more eerie. The first shot of his eyes have the blank emotion of a killer, never blinking, always staring. Even though other characters in this movie have their eyes colored, Kevin's are black and white. But the blue of Elijah Wood's eyes make them look empty and gaunt, void of any humanity. The shadows cut across his face, highlighting his eyes so you can't even look away. When Marv chops his head off, we still see those unblinking and unnerving eyes. He may only be a small part in the movie, but his eyes linger with you so much, so that when you do see him again for a brief moment later in the movie, you know why exactly.
The most striking eyes are the ones that immediately draw your attention when you look at their face. The eyes I chose are big, round pools of blue that cause your heart to flutter when you catch your reflection in them. They are eyes that convey every emotion being felt and cause all onlookers to empathize. They are eyes that have within them years of sadness and isolation, but also the hope and wonder of new experiences and the prospect of growth and love. For all of these reasons, the most striking eyes in any movie belong to Gollum. His eyes are windows into a soul that is tortured and lost. His eyes exhibit his dual personality through the way that they take shape. His eyes shine and sparkle with a near glassy appearance like two giant marbles that anyone would find precious. One ring to rule them all? No. Two eyes to rule them all. Kevin spends much of his movie in Sin City with his eyes not being seen, but instead the bright reflection off his glasses is what the audience sees. His eyes being striking has more to do with how the movie's lit, with most of his face covered in shadows, than the eyes themselves. Kevin's eyes are those of a psychopath with no remorse. They may be the least complicated eyes in history because they have no tragedy or sadness or wonder behind them. The never blinking is actually a detriment to the eyes because they don't feel human-like, like they belong to a person that is real.
Emily, what do you got?
Gollum is a great choice for striking eyes. However, even though you touched on the dual personality of Gollum, Gollum and Smeagol are two characters within one body. And so those eyes are different. You chose Gollum. So that sparkle of new wonder, that's Smeagol, not Gollum. And so I will completely argue the fact that they are two different, and you chose Gollum, the worst striking eyes. Also, I totally agree. Kevin, with his glasses, covering up his eyes, it builds up the mystery and the intrigue. And even though it doesn't show it for a long time, those eyes are what stand out as that character. He is not human to the audience. He is a psychopath. And his eyes portray that beautifully.
I didn't realize we were just going to nitpick about characters with dual personalities by saying Gollum is not Gollum throughout the entire movie. That's a silly argument, in my opinion.
Okay, well, on to question 5. Aside from There Will Be Blood, this is probably the most original story in a movie that we've covered so far on this podcast. So, no limitations this week. I want you guys to pitch a reboot, prequel, or sequel to Sunshine. Ben's up first.
So in my sequel to Sunshine, the Icarus II has been successful in restarting the sun. The Earth begins to thaw and life starts to return to normal. While the people on Earth are happy that it's warming up, the general consensus is it's just a little too fucking bright, and it's giving them a headache. A scientist played by B.D. Wong discovers a way to change the light frequencies of the sun so that the heat remains, but the brightness is turned down just a tad. Think the difference between fluorescent lighting and soft lighting. This will be done by running a screen to block out the intensity of the sun's brightness around Earth. They determine the best way to do this is to attach it to the moon and have it be the length of the moon's orbit around the sun and the width of the Earth itself. By attaching giant metal poles to the eastern and western poles of the moon to anchor down the screen, our brave scientists aboard the Moon Icarus II will provide the Earth with the shade that they desire. They will run into some snags along the way, like when they dock with their International Space Station and are infiltrated by Civil War-era ghosts, or when their captain becomes obsessed with the onboard tanning booth and begins to question whether a successful mission is in the best interest of all. The title of my movie is A Little Less Sunshine.
All right, Emily?
In Sunshine, each character is given the opportunity to send home their last communication once they pass the dead zone. However, we only get to see Kappa's goodbye to his sister at the end of the movie. I would like to do a reboot of Sunshine where we focus on the families of the crew left on the dying Earth, while hearing the last communication telling their loved ones goodbye unknowingly for the last time. We would get a chance to understand the true depths of each crew member with this movie, but also the realities of this sun-starved planet. Now, this reboot would be a series of short vignettes similar to Sin City and Love Actually with multiple storylines, but there would be minimal overlap, only during the transitions from one family member to the next. Each story would contain a primary connection to their corresponding crew member, and the only understandable dialogue would be the audio from the last communication to Earth, while their family member goes about their day. We would see how life continues to barely survive, not only because of the hole in their life from their missing family member, but also the impact of the dying sun on Earth. All of the vignettes would contain 1-second flashes to lead to the crew members' deaths, similar to the flashes of the Icarus I crew in Sunshine, their family oblivious to their tragic ends. I imagine Captain Kaneda would send a video to his only surviving family member, his 23-year-old daughter, Yuki. Working as a clerk in a small convenience store in Japan, we would see her mundane daily life bundling up to brave the cold, interacting with desperate customers, returning home for dinner to find nothing but a single egg and a bottle of beer in her refrigerator, unable to care for herself in this depressive world. As she finishes her beer to go to bed, we hear her father's voice say, "Aishiteru," I love you, Japanese. The camera zooms in on a picture of Yuki and Kaneda in happier times with her late mother, and a flash of Kaneda's face appears as he dies and is suddenly gone. We hear Yuki turn her light off on a close-up of their family photo, and then we cut to a figure in the background in the photo, which happens to lead us to the next story. The title, Those Left Behind, which is the name of a movie, but it's not well known, so haha.
Kirk Cameron.
It's just Left Behind, isn't it?
That's what I thought as well.
That's Left Behind. No, it's
okay.
Those Left Behind.
Okay. All right. I guess questions and comments from me and Wes. Emily, can you give us another example of another crew member?
Sure. We could get to know Harvey and his wife while she wrangles their kids' chaos as a stay-at-home mom. We would get to know more about Trey and his depression when he calls home to his ex-wife, but then changes his mind as we hear the computer Icarus say, "Are you sure you want to delete that file?" before cutting to the next story. And we could also get to know about Cora and her lifetime partner, Sammy, who spends most of her time praying at church to show that juxtaposition of Cora and their religious viewpoints.
Yeah. What about, did you mention Mace's family at all?
I didn't, but Mace
'Cause they
would come
didn't
from a
get one.
military background.
Okay. All right, cool. I was just curious because like there was that fight on the ship in the movie where they fight about that. All right, cool. Ben, why Civil War?
Because I wanted to type Cold War, but accidentally typed Civil and thought it was too funny to change.
The best reason for anything.
Is that okay?
That's it.
All right.
All right. That one was a tough one to judge. There were good answers all around. To recap with question 1, Emily got the point for that one. Question 2, how would you cast your opponent as an additional crew member of the Icarus? You both were very polite to each other and were very, very flaunting of your abilities. But I think that Ben explained Emily a little bit better, as well as had a more logical and reasonable death, or important, impactful, related. One of those words. We can pick one of those words. But Ben's getting the point for that one. Question 3 was definitely hard. They were both perfect.
Ben, I agree. Ben, yours was dope.
Yeah, I actually really liked yours. So
I'm going with Emily mostly because of how much that was a perfect answer for Zaphod Beeblebrox, which might not make sense to people who know Professor Sprout versus Zaphod Beeblebrox, like Matt. But I am picking Zaphod for that one. So Emily gets the point for that one. Question 4 was really interesting. I don't know if I really thought about what I would pick if I had to answer this question.
Right. It wasn't beautiful eyes. It was most striking.
Right. Like that's just, everybody's got eyes. There's a 1,000 eyes in every movie. So you guys had a lot to pick from.
Are there 1,000 eyes in every movie?
Is that a saying?
It is now. Make a t-shirt. Baby.
All right.
So Elijah Wood, great answer. Gollum, great answer. What this one came down to was definitely the defense, or I guess the countering. And I think that Emily, your point of Spiegel being the actual eyes didn't really hold up for me because they're the same eyes. And Ben had some better points about why Kevin's weren't. So this one is going to Ben.
All tied up.
2-2 going into 5. Question 5 was good. You guys both had really good stories. Emily, I like the way you tell stories. So I really enjoyed that. But I think that Ben's pitch had a little more meat on its bones, and Emily didn't quite nail her pitch. So we are giving that one to Ben as well, which brings us to a grand total of Ben 3 and Emily 2. So Emily, I'm very, very excited to see your Egglander. And
what is an egglander, Wesley? For those of us that aren't nerds,
it's an egg drop. Like, who the hell would call it an egglander? I've never heard that before.
And what is an egg drop? Can you guys
drop an egg so it doesn't break?
So you build a device.
Yeah, it's that middle school science project that you had to do to drop an egg from a certain height and not let it crack.
Okay.
I did it in my 11th grade physics class where we had to only have like this much of a box. It was like a third of a milk carton, and you had to drop it. It was smaller.
I don't think we're going to put too many limitations on this. I think I just kind of want to see what you come up with.
I'll wrap it in a pillow.
Yeah. It's not cheating at all.
So congratulations, Ben, on not having to drop an egg or land an egg or whatever you call it.
I still might do that. I still might do that.
I want to.
All three of you guys do it. We eat eggs at our house.
Still eat it.
Yeah, it just has to survive and then eat it.
Well, I don't have much faith in myself, but if you guys are still listening to this episode, thank you so much. And, we appreciate your support. Go ahead and find us all on social media and rate us or whatever. But next week, we will be back with a 3-way debate between Ben, Wesley, and myself doing Harry Potter 5. So,
I like all the Harry Potter references in this episode to really
West
segue us in.
So join us next week and have a good one, everybody.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.